My mom claimed she was broke and moved in, only to secretly rent out my room to a stranger, so I packed her bags and kicked her out on the spot. Part 1. My mom's entitled behavior. My mom moved in, claiming financial struggles, then rented out my room to a stranger without asking because I'm rarely home. Unbelievable. My mom has been a largely disappointing person my entire life. At this point, I'm used to it. I didn't even think she could cross more boundaries than she already has, but she never fails to surprise me with her entitled behavior. My dad bolted on me and my mother when I was just 3 years old. Ever since then, she has been a single mother. As you can probably imagine, it was not an easy task raising a child as a single mother. My mom was not really perfect. I don't know why my dad left, and I know that he was wrong for abandoning us, but I know that it had a lot to do with how my mom lived her life. She was unpredictable and most likely unfaithful to my dad. Anyway, that's all in the past now. There's no point in talking about it. I got through school and worked really hard for a scholarship to college because I knew there was no way my mom would be able to afford a college education for me. Even during my course, my mom constantly kept saying that I was wasting my time and that people from our family don't get degrees. Luckily, I managed to get a full scholarship and graduated college 2 years ago. I was also fortunate enough to land a good job and have been living in my own apartment for the last 2 years as well. I chose to completely cut off all contact with my mom during this time because I didn't need her negativity. Oh, I forgot to mention that I moved out of my hometown after college and now live in a different city. My relationship with my mother has been challenging, to say the least. She has always been super irresponsible with money, and I had to work 2 jobs even as a high school student to be able to finance my personal expenses because she wouldn't give me a single cent. That's all in the past, though. As I've grown up, I've come to peace with how my mom is, and I really thought we could move past all the troubles and have a better relationship. But my mom has again shown me that she cannot be trusted with anything at all. About 3 weeks ago, I was about to go to work one day when I heard the doorbell ring. This was unexpected because anyone who knows me knows that I'm off to work at sharp 9 o'clock in the morning, and it was around 9:30 at the time. I was only home because I had forgotten some important papers and had to come back from work to pick them up. Anyway, I opened the door, and guess who I saw? None other than my mother. It was so unexpected to see her, and I almost didn't recognize her for a few seconds. She also looked pretty rough. She had lost a lot of weight, and her hair was just all over the place. She saw me and said, "Hey, stranger." I didn't know how I felt about her just randomly showing up at my door, but I still hugged her and welcomed her in. I was getting really late for work and couldn't stay a minute longer, but I told her she could make herself comfortable, and I'd be back as soon as possible. Let's just say she made herself a bit too comfortable, but I'll come back to that later. So, I came back from work earlier than usual, because the entire day, I couldn't stop worrying about my mom and why she suddenly decided to show up at my place. I came back home and found her in the living room, watching TV. I sat down, and we had an awkward conversation about how we both had been the last 2 years and stuff. Eventually, I just couldn't ignore the elephant in the room. I finally asked my mom what she was doing here and if everything was all right. She told me that she was going through a really rough time. Apparently, the man she had been seeing for the last 3 years had cheated on her and gotten engaged to someone else. She told me that she had no place to live and would really appreciate it if I let her stay at my place until she got back on her feet. She promised me that she would not overstay her welcome, and at most she would stay for a few weeks. I knew that it would be longer than that. In fact, I could have guaranteed that it's impossible to say when my mom would finally leave my place, but I just couldn't say no to her. I told her that I was sorry for whatever happened to her and that, yeah, she could definitely stay at my place as long as we gave each other space and she didn't interfere with my life. She thanked me again and again and told me that she would not cause any trouble. If only that were true. The first few weeks were fine, I guess. It was a bit annoying because my mom is just a very messy person and I'm the opposite of that, so I would often come back in the evening to find the place messy. The only thing that was not messy was my office space and my room. Oh, I guess I forgot to mention that for my job I often used to work from home in my home office, but since my mom came over, I just wanted to avoid seeing her as much as possible, so I started spending longer hours in the office. It got to a point where, by the second week, I left the house at around 9 o'clock in the morning, as usual, but came back very late at night, around 9:30, and went directly to sleep. I know that wasn't really a solution to my problem, but for the first few weeks, I just wanted to avoid my mom as much as possible. Also, it didn't help that she kept asking me questions about my life whenever I was around her. After 3 whole weeks of spending almost all my time at work, I came home. one day to find a random man sleeping on a fold-out couch in my office. I almost let out a scream in shock. The very little furniture I had in my room was not there. I was on the verge of calling 911, thinking it was some crazy guy who had broken in, when I noticed that there were a few moving boxes in the room. This was bizarre. I quietly walked out with my phone still in my hand when I walked into my mom, peacefully watching TV in the living room. I was like, "Mom, are you aware that there's a random man sleeping in my office?" She shrugged and said, "That's Peter, and he is our new tenant." I was dumbfounded. Was she drunk? I asked her what the hell she meant by that, and she told me that since I'm rarely home and never used that room, she decided to put out an ad on Craigslist and rent out my office room because she needed some extra cash. Honestly, I was just in disbelief. I couldn't even be mad at that point. I asked her if she had lost her mind. She shrugged and said that I shouldn't even be bothered because I'm hardly ever in the house. I took a deep breath and went to the guest room where all my mom's stuff was. I packed it up, put everything in a huge trash bag and dumped it in the living room. I took one more look at her and told her to get the hell out of my house. I went to wake the person sleeping in my office and told him he needs to leave because I'm the apartment owner and he was given the room without my permission. The poor guy was really confused but almost ran out of the room. My mom obviously threw a fit and refused to leave. I took the bag of her stuff and threw it out of the door and told her that if she doesn't leave, I would call the police. That was 4 days ago. My mom has apparently been living in a shelter since then. She has told me that I'm basically the worst person in the universe and has been trying to guilt-trip me into letting her move back in. I still stand by my decision. Am I the asshole here? Oh my God, I keep getting calls from people who have seen my mom's ad listing on Craigslist. I guess she still hasn't taken it down and replaced her number with mine. I called her up to take it down, but she refuses to do so. I'm so annoyed. I'm going to try to find the listing and try to take it down somehow. My mom keeps saying she'll only take it down if I let her move back in with me. But that's not something I'm comfortable with at all. The ad is down. Last week was so annoying because I kept getting calls from random men. I thought it was really weird that I was only getting calls from men. When I finally came across the ad, guess what I saw? The listing said that we're only looking for a male roommate. I'm sure my mom only did that to spite me and annoy me. I confronted her about it, and she said that I deserve that because of how I've treated my own mother. My mom asked me to book her a one-way flight to our hometown. She said she doesn't want to keep staying in shelters. At this point, I just wanted to get rid of her, so I agreed and got her a ticket. She left this morning, and I'm just glad it's over. Looking back on this entire ordeal, I'm overwhelmed by a complex tangle of emotions that I'm still trying to unravel. Kicking my mom out was one of the hardest things I've ever done, not because I doubted it was the right choice, but because it meant finally letting go of a hope I'd clung to for years, that we could have a real, respectful relationship. When she showed up at my door, looking so worn and fragile, I felt a rush of compassion mixed with apprehension. Despite our rocky history, I wanted to believe she'd changed, that this could be a chance to mend things. I let her in, not just into my home, but into that small, guarded part of my heart that still yearned for a mother who'd see me as more than a resource. That flicker of hope, however faint, was what made me say yes, even though I knew her promises were flimsy at best. Her betrayal, renting out my office without asking, hit me like a punch to the gut. I felt violated, as if my home, the space I'd worked so hard to build as my own, was just a tool for her to exploit. The audacity of it left me furious, but beneath that anger was a deep hurt. A realization that she'd never respect my boundaries or value my efforts. I spent years proving myself. Through scholarships, jobs, building a life from scratch, hoping she'd one day see me as someone worthy of pride, not just a means to an end. But her actions showed me that to her, I'm still the kid she can use when it suits her. That moment, standing in my living room, staring at her casual dismissal of my shock, was a turning point. It wasn't just about the room, it was about every time she'd taken me for granted, every time I'd hoped for better, only to be let down. When I confronted her and threw her stuff out, I felt a surge of empowerment, like I was finally reclaiming my space in my life. It was exhilarating to draw that line, to say no more. But that moment was bittersweet. As she yelled, calling me ungrateful and selfish, I saw flashes of my childhood, her neglect, her excuses. The times I had to fend for myself while she spent money on herself or disappeared into her own drama. It hurt to realize that nothing had changed, that the mother I wanted was a fantasy I'd been chasing since I was a kid. The guilt trips, the Craigslist ad, her spiteful choice to list only male roommates. It all felt like a deliberate attempt to punish me for daring to set boundaries. It was her way of saying, "If you won't give me what I want, I'll make your life harder." That stung, not just because of her audacity, but because it confirmed what I'd always feared to her: I'm a utility, not a daughter. Buying her that plane ticket was my final act of detachment, a way to close the door on her chaos. When I booked it, I felt a mix of relief and exhaustion. I was done with her manipulation, done with the emotional roller coaster of hoping for a better relationship, only to be slapped with betrayal. The moment I heard she'd left, I felt lighter, like a weight had been lifted from my shoulders. My apartment, once cluttered with her mess and her drama, felt like mine again. The silence was a gift, a reminder that I've built a life I'm proud of, one that doesn't depend on her approval or presence. But there's a lingering ache, a quiet sadness for the mother I wanted her to be, the one who'd celebrate my successes, respect my boundaries, and treat me like a partner in a relationship, not a resource to exploit. This experience has taught me something profound about myself and about family. I've learned that love, even for a parent, doesn't mean sacrificing your own peace. I spent so long trying to be the good daughter, hoping my efforts would earn her respect. But I see now that some people will never change, no matter how much you give. That realization is painful, but it's also liberating. It's freed me to focus on the life I've built, my career, my friends, the small joys of a quiet evening in my own space. I'm proud of standing up for myself, of refusing to let her entitlement erode my hard-earned independence. Yet the hurt lingers, not just for her actions, but for the years I spent hoping for a connection that was never possible. I mourn the family we could have had, the moments we might have shared if she'd been different. But I'm also starting to see that mourning as part of my healing, a step toward letting go of what was and embracing what is. Moving forward, I'm determined to protect my peace. I've worked too hard to let anyone, even my mom, disrupt the life I've created. I'm rediscovering the joy of my own company, of building a future that's mine alone. There are moments when the sadness creeps in, when I wonder if I could have done more, or if I'm too harsh. But then I remember the Craigslist ad, the stranger in my office, and the years of neglect. And I know I made the right choice. Healing from family wounds is a long, winding road, but I'm okay with that. I've come this far on my own, and I know I can keep going. I'm not just surviving anymore, I'm thriving, and that's something my mom can never take away. NTA comments, NTA, is your mom crazy? I don't even know what I would do in your situation. Not only did she just randomly show up in your life without a warning, but she invited a random person to literally live in your house. I hope you asked him to give the key back in case your mom took it upon herself to give him access to your home. Don't give a single thought to your mom, OP, NTA. Your mom deserves to be in the shelter after what she did. The delusion and the entitlement are just out of this world. You were too kind to her in the first place. Part 2. Neighbor issue over cultural names because of my work. I, a female, 37 years old, temporarily moved to the U.S. with my family, my husband, Adrian, a male, 38 years old, and my daughter, Moa, a female, 10 years old. We're only going to be living here for the next few months, so we enrolled our daughter in an international school so she doesn't have to change her curriculum. It's important to note that my husband is Chicano and Polish, and our daughter is obviously both. She speaks both Spanish and Polish, as well as English, because we normally live in London. With that out of the way, we moved into our new house a little while ago. Our neighbor has a little girl around Moa's age, and they've become friends quickly. I've only met the mom a few times, but she seemed lovely enough. Anyway, a few days ago, I was reading a book on my porch when I saw my neighbor, Leah, pulling into her driveway. When she saw me, she motioned at me to wait for her, so I put on my flip-flops and came over to help carry her groceries, while she told me whatever she wanted to tell me. She started a conversation normally, but then quickly turned to what she heard. The girls talking about when they were playing yesterday at her house. She was appalled. Her words, not mine. Apparently the girls were playing with Barbies. Yes, my 10-year-old still plays with them occasionally. The appalling thing my daughter did was not call her family dolls grandmother grandma. Instead, she calls them abuela and babcia, hence the mention of Moa's background earlier, one being Spanish for grandmother, the other Polish. That's how she calls her grandmothers. Moa's new friend asked why, and Moa explained it, and the kids continued playing. Leah was distraught at the idea that my child doesn't call her grandmothers. Grandmas or nans or whatever else you'd call them in the US. I tried to politely explain our reasoning, but she went on a tangent about how I am ruining my daughter's future by messing with her head, threatening to call CPS on me. Yeah, she really said that. She also said that I'm trying to brainwash her daughter into changing how she calls her grandparents. What the fuck? Anyway, I hate wasting my time on arguments, and she clearly wasn't in the right state of mind. I put the groceries down, told her to have a lovely day, and walked back to my house. I thought she might realize later what she'd done was wrong, but no. She started telling all my new neighbors about the situation and tried confronting me again. I told her to drop it and mind her own business, but she wouldn't stop. I eventually called her stupid and told her to never talk to me again. In a twist of events, it seems some of my neighbors think I'm the asshole for calling her that. I'm confused. I didn't think calling someone stupid would be much of an issue, but here we are. Am I the asshole for that? NTA comments. NTA, you just found an American racist. They say they're a melting pot, multicultural and whatever, but they believe anyone who speaks more than one language is evil and wants people to be as uneducated as they are. If your daughter is slightly exotic, they'll have a problem. Personally, I think you were right about calling her that, but neighbors are the same thing, so they'll of course defend her. Get out of there fast. NTA. Hello, well this is funny. CPS? Whoa, that's going nuclear. I'd like to hear that complaint and the response from your attorney. She's weird. People in the USA use all sorts of names for grandparents, mostly because grandparents don't want to feel old, so they have. Their grandkids call them all sorts of foreign names for grandparents, or just outright make up some name to feel special. NTA, I'm extremely confused by your neighbor's behavior. I'm English, by the way, but she's calling them grandma or nan or whatever, but in their native tongue. I would assume it would be more confusing for your husband's mom or your mom to suddenly be called nan when they'd been called the respective counterparts in their languages. She sounds very ignorant. Part 3. Dog incident at the birthday party. My 7-year-old son was having a birthday party the previous weekend, and a number of his friends and schoolmates around his age came over, along with their parents. I have a male mastiff mix. For context, I know people always love to exaggerate and say their dog is so loving, regardless of their dog's true personality. My dog is friendly toward my family and people he's familiar with, but he's very aloof toward strangers. He doesn't bark at strangers, but will have a low growl if he's patted or touched without the proper introduction. So anyway, for the party, I decided the best solution was to keep him upstairs, on the 2nd or 3rd floor with a dog gate installed at the stairs. The party would be confined to the 1st floor and the garden. Halfway through the party, my son and his 2 friends wanted to go upstairs to see my dog. These 2 friends have come over to my house frequently, and the 3 of them have spent unsupervised time around my dog without any incidents for the past 2 years. They are very aware of the rules and boundaries. I've said they can play fetch and stuff with him, but they are never to play with his tail or face or try to sit on him. Another boy, let's call him B, and his mom apparently heard that my dog was upstairs and wanted to head up too. I said, nope, sorry, my dog doesn't play too well with people he doesn't know, and I can't be around upstairs all the time. B's mom insisted that it would be fine, and that her son loves playing with dogs, etc. I cut her off, and said, nah, another time, and directed them both toward the other toys and party stuff going on. Less than 5 minutes later, I heard some barking and screaming from upstairs. I ran up to see B crying and his mom yelling at my dog and me. All sorts of accusations were hurled at me, including having a rabid dog, an untrained dog, and she said she was going to ensure my dog was put down. I tried to ask the other kids, my son and his friends, what happened. It turns out that B and his mother came up on their own, and while my dog was lying in one corner, he decided to go over and start pulling his tail, even though the other kids told him not to. His mother waved them off and allowed B to continue. That resulted in my dog getting up and barking at them, as well as growling. I checked B for any injuries and found none. My CCTV recording showed exactly what my son and his friends had described, and there was no contact between my dog and the boy at any point. B's mom took him to the doctor anyway for a full checkup. No injuries were found, and she wanted me to compensate for that, along with apologizing for the incident. I said no, and she would be lucky if I didn't pursue anything about trespassing into my house's upper floors. So, am I the asshole? NTA comments. NTA. Some people are really stupid. At one point, I had a rescue dog who had been abandoned on the street while pregnant and half-starved. I took her in, and after she had puppies, my super came to my apartment to make repairs. I told him that my dog was extremely unfriendly and had puppies. He kept saying, dogs love me, and insisted on going to the room where my dog and puppies were, even though I told him repeatedly to leave her alone. Long story short, when he tried to pet her when she was guarding her puppies, she bit him on the face. He needed stitches but admitted it was entirely his fault for harassing a nursing mother. Dog when warned over and over not to go in the room where she and her babies were. You told her to stay away. And any sensible person would have heeded your instructions and not put her kid at risk. She's lucky that she and her kid weren't bitten after abusing the dog. Good thing you had the camera to show what really happened. In the future, you might consider locking the door of the room where your dog is when kids are over. NTA, but please be careful. If your dog just barked at strangers, I wouldn't worry, but a low growl with no bark is usually a precursor to a bite. Dogs have many ways of showing discomfort. Most are subtle, looking away, whale eyes, pinned ears, etc. When these are consistently disregarded, they start going straight to a growl. The next step is usually a bite. I'd reevaluate whether unsupervised interactions with children are a good idea and maybe involve a trainer in this decision. I'm saying this based on your post. Maybe you left a lot of important stuff out, or maybe you've already involved a trainer and you know that it's safe. I don't know, but I'm not saying this to attack you or anything, just out of genuine concern in case there's anything in this comment you weren't aware of. You're not the asshole for not paying for the doctor's visit or not letting other kids upstairs, but you did trigger this situation by allowing your son and his two friends to go upstairs during the party in the first place. First off, it's rude, but it also set up a situation where other kids were interested in going there. If the party is downstairs, that needs to apply to everyone. Your son's close friends can stay late after the party if they want to see the dog.